Part 1. The Empress. In Chapter 1, Amelia is harshly reprimanded by Edith, the head maid, after an accidental glance and a lie about breaking a plate. As Edith prepares to punish her, a noblewoman, Lady Constance, arrives and orders the kitchen staff to set a table for the Empress Modina. The Empress, however, is an emaciated and unresponsive girl. Lady Constance attempts to force-feed her, but when Regent Salder arrives, he angrily chastises Lady Constance for her failure. Salder unexpectedly promotes Amelia to the role of Imperial Secretary to the Empress, firing Lady Constance and warning Amelia not to fail him. In Chapter 2, Amelia is taken to a hidden cellar where Empress Modina is kept in a small dark room. Modina, who is frail and unresponsive, lies on a pile of straw. Amelia is shocked by the poor conditions but is allowed to stay with Modina, offering comfort and a blanket. Despite her efforts to engage with the Empress, Modina remains unresponsive. Amelia, tasked with training the Empress, feels unprepared and overwhelmed. She promises not to harm Modina, sharing a secret about her own fear of the dark and plans to bring candles the next day, though she struggles with new fears herself. In Chapter 3, Amelia wakes to find that the Empress has not been fed properly. She goes to the kitchen, where Ibis makes a special soup for Modina. Amelia spends the morning cleaning the Empress's cell, bringing her belongings, and making the space more comfortable. She talks to Modina while brushing her hair, sharing stories about her family and her life in Terran Vale. Despite Modina's silence, Amelia continues to care for her, offering comfort and companionship. When a guard arrives to take Amelia to Regent Salder, she reluctantly leaves, saying a quiet goodbye to the Empress. Part 2. The Messenger. In Chapter 1, an Imperial courier, racing against time to deliver an important dispatch, encounters an unnatural roadblock in a forest. Suspecting highwaymen, he is relieved to find soldiers from Sir Brecton's command instead. However, the soldiers are confused by the courier's lack of a password and briefly threaten him. After a tense confrontation, the courier proves his identity by showing a genuine dispatch. Though the soldiers apologize, they warn him about the consequences of breaking protocol. He rushes onward, determined to deliver the dispatch before Sir Brecton's wrath falls upon him. In Chapter 2, Royce and Hadrian, having completed their deception with the courier, discuss their feelings about their work. Hadrian expresses dissatisfaction with their lives as spies, lamenting that he imagined a more heroic destiny. Royce, while indifferent to such idealism, tries to reason with him, pointing out their financial success and freedom. Hadrian reveals his underlying frustration, citing a desire to help others, not just make money. As they prepare to leave, Royce hints at a secret he's keeping, suggesting that they may need a break, though his knowledge of the situation contradicts Hadrian's expectations about their future assignments. Part 3. The Miracle. In Chapter 1, Princess Arista Essendon endures an uncomfortable journey back to Medford after a year of diplomatic missions. Reflecting on her past, she feels the loss of her former bodyguard, Hilfred, and the weight of missed opportunities. She reviews a document showing the rapid expansion of the Nyphron Empire, noting that Melengar is dangerously isolated. As the carriage nears Medford, it suddenly halts. Arista steps out to see an alarming sight. The Nyphron Imperial Army has encamped just outside the city. Realizing the grave threat, she demands to be taken home immediately. In Chapter 2, Princess Arista rushes home to Medford and demands answers about the Nyphron Imperial Army encamped nearby. She learns that the army has been there for a week and that King Alric launched a failed attack across the river. Disappointed in the news, she heads to the war room to meet with the advisors. She orders her maid Melissa to prepare her gown and bring food, while teasing her new bodyguard for almost losing her. The chapter sets the stage for the princess to confront the growing threat to her kingdom. In Chapter 3, King Alric and his council discuss the unexpected pause in the Imperial Army's advance across the river. They debate potential political motives behind the delay, with Sir Ecton and others criticizing Alric's recent decisions. The conversation shifts when Arista is asked about the Empress Modina, revealing her belief that the invasion is more likely influenced by the Church and conservative imperialists rather than Modina herself. Royce Melborn, a royal informant, then arrives, confirming that the Imperial Army is withdrawing due to an invasion of Renid by Deegan Gaunt's nationalists. This news shifts the focus to a new threat. In Chapter 4, Arista returns from her failed mission to secure allies for Melengar while Alric expresses frustration at her lack of success. Tensions rise as Alric blames her for the kingdom's troubles and reveals the growing unrest among the people. Arista defends herself, emphasizing that the church's accusations of witchcraft against her hindered her efforts. Alric then decides to send Linroy instead of Arista to negotiate with Gaunt, further straining their relationship. Arista, determined to fix things, plans to take matters into her own hands. Meanwhile, Mavin struggles with the loss of his loved ones. Part 4. The Nature of Right. In Chapter 1, Royce meets Hadrian at the Rose and Thorn Tavern, where Hadrian expresses frustration with their line of work, feeling dishonorable profiteering off the war. Royce informs him that Alric has another job for them, to contact Gaunt and the Nationals. Hadrian, disillusioned, debates fighting in the war but is uncertain which side to choose. Royce tries to convince him that there are no purely honorable causes, only perspectives. Despite their disagreements, Royce heads to Gwen's while asking Hadrian to keep an eye out for a messenger from the castle. Hadrian remains conflicted about his future role. In Chapter 2, Royce visits Gwen at Medford House, where they share a tender moment. Royce confides in Gwen about his worries regarding Hadrian and the potential dangers of their work. Gwen, who has always known Royce's secrets, advises him to consider Hadrian's perspective, emphasizing that Hadrian might find meaning in sacrifice. Royce reveals his plan to investigate Esarhaddon's story, hoping to find proof of Hadrian's heritage. Gwen warns him about a looming decision that could lead to darkness or light, depending on the loss of someone close to him. Royce, troubled, vows to protect Hadrian. In Chapter 3, Royce meets Princess Arista at the Rose and Thorn, where she informs him of a diplomatic mission to contact Gaunt and the Nationals, aiming to form an alliance that could sway Trent into joining the war. Arista insists on accompanying them, as she is Melengar's ambassador. Royce reluctantly agrees to her terms, but warns her of the dangers. Hadrian, having officially resigned from Riyria, refuses to join the mission, but Royce convinces him to come one last time as a favor. Hadrian reluctantly agrees, and they prepare for the journey ahead. Part 5. Sheridan. In Chapter 1, Arista travels with Royce and Hadrian, enduring the heat and discomfort of the journey. Royce leads them on a roundabout path, which Arista silently accepts, though she questions their destination. As they pass through the Meadowlands, she reflects on her past studies at Sheridan University, where she learns some magical skills. Arista practices a rain spell, distracting herself from the journey, and soon it begins to rain. When they approach Sheridan, Arista offers advice on a trusted professor, Arcadius, who could help with their mission. Royce remains silent, leaving her feeling frustrated by his lack of response. In Chapter 2, Arista leads Royce and Hadrian to Sheridan University to meet her former magic teacher, Arcadius. The university's history and its connection to political controversies are briefly explained. Upon meeting Arcadius, the group is immediately caught in a tense moment when Royce threatens the wizard, suggesting he knows too much. After a brief scare, Arcadius reveals that he has known Royce and Hadrian for years and introduced them to each other. They all agree to speak in private, and Royce asks to stay the night at the university while they discuss their questions, leaving Arista frustrated. In Chapter 3, Royce seeks answers from Arcadius about a mysterious amulet belonging to Hadrian. The wizard reveals it was crafted by Esarhaddon, who claimed to have made 2 amulets to protect the Emperor's son and his guardian. Royce is suspicious of Esarhaddon's intentions and questions whether the amulets have magical powers. Arcadius explains that the Emperor's heir may not exist, or if they do, could be hidden by a secret group. Arcadius warns Royce that searching for the heir could lead him into a dangerous, centuries-old conflict where no one is safe, and all actions come with great risks. In Chapter 4, Arcadius arranges for Arista, Hadrian, and Royce to stay in the unused dormitory, Glen's attic. After drying their wet clothes, Arista overhears a conversation among students who speculate about Melengar's fall. Royce later reveals that he dealt with the students who were snooping around the carriage house. Arista then seeks out Arcadius to ask about her unusual admission to Sheridan University. Arcadius explains that it was arranged by the Chancellor and Percy Braga, but a mysterious third figure, Bishop Maurice Salder, was also involved, revealing deeper connections to her family's past. In Chapter 5, Arista discusses her time studying magic under Arcadius and Esarhaddon with Hadrian and Royce. Arcadius taught structured lessons focused on observation and questioning, while Esarhaddon emphasized subtle movements and mental focus. Despite her extensive training, Arista struggles with practical magic. However, after reflecting on her teachings, she successfully boils water using a combination of hand motions and sound. Hadrian is amazed, but Royce remains skeptical. As Arista smiles privately at her success, she recalls a similar moment from her past with Arcadius, realizing that what she thought was pride was concern. Part 6. The Word. In Chapter 1, Amelia reflects on the slow progress of the Empress Modina, who has regained some strength but remains unresponsive. Despite feeding her and telling her stories, Modina still does not speak, and Amelia fears the progress is too slow. She recounts various tales, including one of Kylie and the White Feather, hoping to bring Modina back to life. As the candles flicker and the cold settles in, Amelia grows weary, feeling that perhaps they will need to create their own miracles. She blows out the candles, hoping for change as she drifts to sleep. In Chapter 2, Amelia decides to take action and moves Modina out of her filthy cell despite the risks. She convinces the guard to let her take the Empress to the kitchen for her meal, citing her responsibility as Imperial Secretary. In the kitchen, the staff is surprised to see Modina, and Amelia requests special treatment for her, including extra bread and fruit. While in the kitchen, Modina forms an unexpected connection with Red, the huntsman's old dog. The scene is interrupted by Edith Mon, who reacts coldly and leaves without a word, adding tension to the situation. In Chapter 3, Regent Salder oversees the renovations of the palace, determined to maintain the illusion of a thriving empire despite Modina's condition. The empire faces turmoil with revolts and threats from neighboring regions. Salder meets with Louis Guy and Merrick Marius, a new advisor, who proposes a solution to the nationalist uprising. Merrick critiques Salder's handling of the Empress and the Empire, suggesting that an alliance between Melengar and the nationalists could lead to disaster. He offers his expertise in exchange for payment, highlighting the dire situation the Empire faces on multiple fronts. In Chapter 4, Regent Salder enters the kitchen furious at Modina's behavior and demands Amelia's dismissal. He criticizes Amelia for allowing the Empress to interact with a dog and sit on the floor. As Salder orders Amelia's removal, Modina suddenly speaks, saying no, stopping Salder in his tracks. This act surprises everyone, including the regent, who begins to reconsider his judgment of Amelia's care. After observing Modina's improved condition, he reluctantly allows Amelia to retain her position, begrudgingly acknowledging her efforts, and remarks on Modina's unexpected ability to speak, which he had doubted. Part 7. The Jewel. In Chapter 1, Arista, an experienced writer, is disappointed by the difficult journey Royce has planned for her. She struggles to keep up as they travel over rough terrain, realizing her skills are insufficient for the pace. After a long, exhausting ride, they stop to rest, and Arista reluctantly eats a simple, unappetizing meal. Despite her discomfort, she continues, but the journey wears her down. She becomes disheartened, questioning her decisions and feeling like a failure. Frustrated and fatigued, Arista contemplates returning home, convinced she has made a mistake by leaving the safety of her castle. In Chapter 2, Arista wakes to a beautiful morning and enjoys a peaceful moment by a pond, reflecting on the journey. The group reaches the road, and Arista is struck by how Royce and Hadrian now appear in formal attire. When they encounter a troop of Imperial soldiers, Royce smoothly deceives the officer with a fabricated story, while Arista nervously follows his instructions. As the soldiers pass, Arista is horrified to see elves locked in grain wagons suffering in captivity. The sight stirs something within her, but Royce and Hadrian quickly redirect her attention as they continue their journey. In Chapter 3, Arista, Royce, and Hadrian prepare for a meeting with a key figure in the city. They meet Price, a member of the Diamond Thieves Guild, who arranges a meeting with Cosmos Sebastian Delure, the wealthiest merchant in Novron. Cosmos listens to Royce's proposition about a potential alliance with Melengar and the Nationalists to counter the new Empire's forces. Cosmos agrees to contact Gaunt and set up a meeting, warning them that the guild may be compromised. Royce and the others decide to leave immediately for Renid, where they'll wait for the meeting details. In Chapter 4, Price leads Arista, Royce, and Hadrian through the city, avoiding guards, and onto a boat headed down the Burnham River. As they navigate the dark waters, a pursuit ensues by a group in a wherry trying to board their boat. Tension builds as they near two bridges guarded by crossbow-wielding soldiers. At the South Bridge, Arista uses a technique to incapacitate the soldiers, allowing Hadrian to defeat them. After escaping, they notice the wherry is abandoned, and Royce joins them as they leave Culnora behind, continuing their journey under the cover of night. Part 8. Hintidar. In Chapter 1, Arista wakes up disoriented on a skiff with Hadrian, Wally, and Etcher. After a brief conversation, they stop at Finland's mill, where they receive a signal about smuggled goods. Hadrian teaches Arista how to properly saddle a horse, revealing his own past and a secret about Royce's history with someone named Merrick Marius, known as Cutter. Merrick, now working for the Empire, may be after them, but Royce remains tight-lipped. The group decides to head to Hintidar to lay low, uncertain of what dangers await from Merrick or the Empire. In Chapter 2, Hadrian returns to his childhood village, Hintidar, with Arista and Royce. As they pass through, the villagers react with suspicion, and Hadrian is met with hostility by Armagil, the village brew mistress, who punches him for abandoning his father years ago. After reconnecting with old friends like Dunstan, Hadrian learns of the tensions caused by the recent arrival of an imperial envoy, Lurit, who threatens to arrest him. Despite the tension, Hadrian, Royce, and Arista are welcomed to a feast at the bakery. Arista, drunk on beer, awkwardly shares her backstory. In Chapter 3, Arista wakes up in discomfort and reflects on the silver gown she had planned to wear to impress Deegan Gaunt, realizing it may not be the best choice. She changes into a simpler dress and joins Arbor, who is baking. They converse about wealth, with Arbor expressing curiosity about Arista's life. Arista, feeling a twinge of envy at Arbor's simpler yet contented life, offers her the silver gown, despite Arbor's initial reluctance. After some encouragement, Arbor accepts it, and Arista also gives her the corset, completing their exchange with a heartfelt hug. In Chapter 4, Arista visits the village well and encounters Hadrian and Royce, who are speaking with Grimbald, a local blacksmith. Hadrian reveals he was born in the village and used to want to be a soldier, but his father, a blacksmith, wanted him to take over the trade. The two had a falling out before Hadrian left, and he never returned. Grimbald hands Hadrian a letter from his deceased father, which Hadrian is reluctant to open. Arista offers her support, but Hadrian struggles with his past, eventually opening the letter before walking away without explaining its contents. In Chapter 5, Arista and Royce discuss the letter Hadrian received from his late father. Arista reveals that Hadrian walked off after reading it and seems to want to be alone. Royce questions her decision not to tell Hadrian the truth about his heritage, despite Esarhaddon's warnings. Arista admits she came to the village seeking proof of the wizard's claims, but she didn't expect to find anything. Royce insists that Hadrian deserves the truth, noting that his father's intense training in sword fighting points to something significant. Royce agrees to speak with Hadrian when he returns. Marshall is a North American male with a calm but mildly emotive tone. He delivers a smooth narration for stories or speak your presentations at work. In Chapter 2, Royce grows anxious as night falls, sensing an unease in the village. After watching for Hadrian, Royce is approached by Etcher, who informs him that a meeting with Gaunt is scheduled for that night. Royce decides to prioritize the mission, instructing Arista to leave with Etcher while he stays behind to find Hadrian. Just as they prepare to depart, Dunstan arrives with news that Hadrian has been arrested along with Royce and Arista. Royce quickly devises a plan to split up, ensuring Arista's safety while he focuses on rescuing Hadrian before it's too late. In Chapter 3, Hadrian and Royce are trapped in a well-like prison. Royce shares his plan to infiltrate the Imperial army, updates Hadrian on Arista's safety, and reveals a secret about Hadrian's father and his potential heritage. As they face threats from Lurit, who demands information about Arista, they realize Etcher's betrayal. Royce admits he stayed behind to help Hadrian, and the two escape by climbing the walls of the pit. Afterward, they find Arista's horses and prepare to continue their journey, despite the looming danger from Lurit and the Empire. In Chapter 4, Arista endures a painful ride with Etcher, who continues to push her forward despite her discomfort. As they travel through a desolate wilderness, Arista becomes acutely aware of her vulnerability, fearing Etcher's intentions. They reach a remote ruin where Arista encounters two large, intimidating men. After a tense exchange, the men demand proof of her identity, and Etcher's behavior grows more aggressive. When one of the men strikes her, Arista feels humiliated and helpless. Desperate, she taps into her magical abilities to defend herself, using her powers to fight back as the men try to restrain her. In Chapter 5, Royce and Hadrian find Arista alone at the ruins of Amberton Lee, where she reveals she killed 2 Surret knights in self-defense using the art, boiling water to death. She is disturbed by the experience, but Hadrian reassures her. The group discusses their next move, and Royce decides they should head to Ratibor, where they hope to uncover more clues. Hadrian receives a cryptic message from his father, suggesting a connection to Ratibor. As they prepare to leave, Arista senses something unsettling about the place, which feels haunted. Royce and Hadrian agree it's time to move on. Part 10. Rewards. In Chapter 1, Amelia, a kitchen servant, is summoned by Regent Salder to his office. After a confusing journey through the palace, she meets Nimbus, a refugee seeking employment, and promises to help him after her meeting. Upon reaching Salder, he unexpectedly rewards her for her efforts, granting her the title of Lady Amelia and appointing her as Imperial Secretary to the Empress. Salder assigns her the task of preparing Empress Modina to deliver a speech to the public, aiming to quell rumors about her health. Amelia is thrust into her new role with a sense of responsibility and pressure. In Chapter 2, Amelia shares her patent of nobility with the kitchen staff, causing excitement and teasing from Ibis and others. She introduces Nimbus, a refugee, and arranges for him to eat with the staff. Over the meal, Amelia confides in Nimbus about her confusion over her new noble status and her responsibility to teach Empress Modina how to behave as royalty. Realizing Nimbus's expertise in etiquette, Amelia offers him a position as imperial tutor to help teach Modina how to give a speech in 3 days, marking the beginning of their new partnership. Part 11. Ratibor. In Chapter 1, Arista, Royce, and Hadrian arrive in Ratibor, a city fraught with tension and turmoil. They navigate through the chaotic streets and find refuge in the underground sewers, led by Quartz, a mysterious woman. In a hidden chamber, they meet a group of thieves, including Polish, their leader. The conversation reveals a brewing resistance against imperial control and the capture of a key figure named Emery. As the group plans their next steps, Royce's past is revealed through the Mark of Manzan, and they prepare to send word about Etcher's betrayal. Meanwhile, tensions in the city continue to rise. In Chapter 2, Royce wakes early, observing the bustling, grimy East End square. He notices a young boy scavenging for food and sees him bullied by 2 older boys who steal his belongings. Royce watches silently, feeling the boy's suffering but doing nothing. After the bullying, Royce buys an apple from a grocer and secretly places a gold coin inside. He then intentionally drops the apple by the boy's cart, offering a small gesture of help. The scene highlights Royce's detached nature as he navigates the harsh realities of life in Ratibor, untouched by the struggles around him. In Chapter 3, Hadrian, Royce, and Arista visit a Nyphron church to search for records related to Hadrian's father. Monsignor Bartholomew initially denies access, but eventually reveals that there are no records from 2992, despite the church's establishment in that year. He recounts a bloody confrontation where Hadrian's father, Tramusdan, fought the Surret Knights, protecting Nyphron, the heir of Novron. After Nyphron's death and the massacre, Dan disappeared. Bartholomew admits his failure in safeguarding the heir, and the church was built as a monument to those lost, a symbol of a dream that died due to his actions. In Chapter 4, Arista, Hadrian, and Royce witness a public flogging in the central square, where 12 individuals, including Emery and a woman from Kilner, are punished for alleged conspiracy and treason. The sheriff carries out brutal lashings as the crowd watches, and the woman from Kilnar dies from her injuries. Emery, defiant, claims that Viceroy Andrus is the real traitor before enduring his own flogging. Arista is disturbed by the cruelty, but Royce reminds her that power always exploits the weak. Hadrian, deeply affected, walks away, and Arista reflects on the nature of power and idealism. Part 12. Making It Rain. In Chapter 1, Hadrian returns to the Rat's Nest to find Arista determined to take control of Ratibor after Gaunt's disappearance, which likely involved Merrick's manipulation. Arista plans to storm the armory, seize weapons, and overthrow the garrison, hoping to spark a rebellion with Emery as a martyr. Despite doubts from Royce and Hadrian about the practicality of her plan, Arista argues that the nationalists must act now or risk total destruction by the Empire. After a heated discussion, they agree to hide Emery and prepare for the rebellion, knowing it could change the course of history. In Chapter 2, a fire breaks out at a stable in Ratibor with townspeople working together to save a nearby butcher shop. Amidst the chaos, Emery Dorn goes missing, and the next day, a dummy is found in his place. The city is thrown into turmoil, with officials and citizens speculating on his fate. While rumors swirl, including that Emery might have escaped or been freed by the guards, the search intensifies. The guards search various places, including the Dunlap house, where they find nothing but sickness. Days later, a soldier who searched the house dies from the pox, and Emery remains unaccounted for. In Chapter 3, Arista, Hadrian, and Royce discuss their plans after Emery's recovery. They agree to spread the word of Emery as a hero and prepare for the revolt. Arista strategizes, including gathering leaders, devising a battle plan for the garrison, and sending Royce to secure aid from the north. Royce suggests splitting the message into 3 parts to increase the chances of success. The conversation turns to the mystery of the heir's death, with Hadrian expressing doubt about the heir's true fate. They discuss possible outcomes and their next steps, each preparing for the challenges ahead. In Chapter 4, Arista reflects on her plan and its challenges, knowing she has only 2 days before Brecton arrives. She checks on Emery, who has woken up and is surprised to learn he is being helped by a princess. Arista reassures him and orders him to rest. Later, she steps outside into the quiet night, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. Alone, she experiments with magic, using her creativity to manipulate the elements. She successfully creates a windstorm that brings rain, symbolizing her growing mastery of the art and her increasing control over her own destiny. Part 13. Modina. In Chapter 1, Modina, the Empress, struggles with the numbness and pain of her life since her father's death. She begins to regain clarity through her interaction with Amelia, who helps her remember a time before the darkness. Modina learns of her legendary heritage and struggles with her role, feeling like a ghost in her own body. Meanwhile, Ethelred and the Earl of Chadwick discuss military strategies, including plans to conquer Melengar, while Modina remains detached from the politics around her. The chapter ends with the Earl of Chadwick expressing admiration for Modina, which makes her uncomfortable. In Chapter 2, Modina is moved to a new bedroom on the 5th floor of the palace, where she is treated with more respect by Amelia, who gives her orders to improve her living conditions. As they pass servants in the halls, Amelia asserts her authority, securing Modina a new chamber. In the new room, Modina revels in the sunlight and fresh air, feeling the first relief she has in a long time. Meanwhile, a conversation from below reaches her ears, discussing military matters and the rising threat of Gaunt, a general who is becoming increasingly important in the Empire's struggle. Part 14. The Eve. In Chapter 1, Jill, standing watch in the rain, encounters a mysterious man, Lord Blackwater, who demands to see Commander Parker. Despite Jill's attempt to challenge him, the stranger disarms him with ease and reprimands him for not being properly armed. Lord Blackwater then berates Sergeant Milford for being unprepared and orders him to relieve Gill from his post. As they make their way through the camp, the stranger reveals his identity and is allowed entry to the farmhouse where Commander Parker is. Jill, now tasked with getting a crossbow, watches as Lord Blackwater steps inside. In Chapter 2, Hadrian meets Commander Parker, who is dismissive and unprepared for battle. Hadrian introduces himself as Marshal Lord Blackwater and offers his assistance, suggesting that Parker's hesitation to act against the enemy is due to his lack of combat experience. Tensions rise when Parker accuses Hadrian of being involved in a plot against Commander Gaunt and betraying Arista Essendon. Hadrian denies the accusations, revealing that Arista is working to aid their cause, but Parker refuses to believe him. As the situation escalates, Hadrian reluctantly begins to surrender his weapons to avoid conflict. In Chapter 3, Arista discusses her plan with her allies as the storm rages outside. Polish expresses doubt about their chances, but Arista argues that victory could change the political landscape. The group agrees on a strategy to take the armory, with Emery leading the assault. Arista insists on joining the battle, despite Emery's objections. The group finalizes the plan, considering potential challenges and contingencies. As they prepare for the fight, Dr. Jaron proposes a toast, acknowledging the risks and sacrifices ahead. Arista, despite her bitterness, drinks with them, fully aware of the dangers they face. In Chapter 4, Arista struggles with fear and uncertainty as the battle approaches. She contemplates using magic, but fears losing control. Emery visits her room, and they share a vulnerable conversation about their anxieties. Emery confesses his fear of battle and his longing to be noble enough to marry her. Arista reassures him of his courage and jokingly suggests he could be knighted for his heroism. After he leaves, Arista reflects on her emotions, conflicted between the imminent battle and her feelings for Emery. She prays for a miracle, hoping for a positive outcome despite the danger ahead. Part 15. The Speech. In Chapter 1, Amelia scrambles to prepare Empress Modina for an important public ceremony. She works with Nimbus and the seamstress to ensure Modina's gown and appearance are perfect despite last-minute challenges. Amelia's anxiety escalates as mistakes accumulate, including a broken shoe and missing headdress. Regent Salder scolds her, emphasizing the ceremony's importance, while the Earl of Chadwick requests Amelia's help in courting the Empress. Amidst the chaos, Amelia fears Modina's fragile mental state could lead to disaster. As the ceremony draws near, Amelia struggles to keep everything together, knowing her success or failure could have severe consequences. In Chapter 2, Regent Ethelred delivers a lengthy speech celebrating the Empire's success, while Amelia anxiously awaits the presentation. Modina, dressed in her gown and headdress, is introduced to the crowd, which erupts in deafening cheers. Surprisingly, Modina quiets the crowd with a graceful gesture and speaks confidently, mentioning Amelia's efforts in helping her recover. The crowd cheers again as she finishes her speech. Amelia is shocked by Modina's unexpected words, which elevate her status. Salder praises Amelia, acknowledging her cleverness. Despite the praise, Amelia worries about the consequences of Modina's unexpected behavior. Part 16. The Battle of Ratibor. In Chapter 1, Hadrian, chained to a metal stake in the rain, reflects on his failure to escape and save Arista. He regrets not warning her about the nationalist's betrayal, knowing she may face death. Desperate, he offers money to a sentry, Jill, to deliver a message to Arista, but Jill takes the gold and ignores the plea. As Hadrian struggles with frustration, memories of Arista flood his mind, and he envisions her death. He desperately tries to free himself, but a guard stops him, mocking him for his efforts. With the dawn breaking, Hadrian's hope continues to fade. In Chapter 2, Emery witnesses the growing crowd in the square gathering to avenge King Urith's murder. When city guards approach, Emery declares their intent and a fight ensues. He kills one guard and wounds the other as the mob surges forward, taking the guards' weapons. They storm the armory, overpowering the few soldiers inside, and quickly arm themselves with swords, shields, and armor. The mob rejoices, but Emery's moment of elation is interrupted when Arista warns him that the garrison is coming. Realizing the danger, Emery commands the mob to evacuate and form up in the square for the upcoming confrontation. In Chapter 3, Arista organizes the men into formation as they prepare for the garrison's arrival. Emery directs the men, teaching them how to wield their weapons, while Arista and others distribute swords, shields, and armor. As the soldiers approach, Sheriff Vegan tries to intimidate the rebels, threatening them with execution, but offering leniency. Emery responds defiantly, rallying the men. Just as tensions reach their peak, Vegan orders a crossbow to fire, striking Emery in the chest. As Emery dies in her arms, Arista screams in grief, then rises, holding his sword, and orders the men to hold their line. In Chapter 4, Lord Esarhaddon frees Hadrian from his chains and takes command, overriding Commander Parker. Hadrian, now the leader of the Nationalist Army, urges an immediate attack on Dermot's forces before reinforcements arrive. The soldiers, untrained and disorganized, prepare for battle. Hadrian plans a surprise attack, using the rain to hinder the enemy's movement. As they approach the Imperial camp, Hadrian realizes the enemy is unprepared, caught off guard by Esarhaddon's subtle magic. With the Imperial forces still asleep, Hadrian orders the charge, seizing the opportunity to strike. The battle for the Imperial camp begins. In Chapter 5, Sheriff Vegan orders the rebels to surrender, threatening executions, but Arista stands firm. As tensions rise, crossbow bolts rain down, killing several of the sheriff's men. The rebels, now armed with crossbows, retaliate, but the garrison's experience overwhelms them, causing the line to break. Arista, devastated by the losses and feeling responsible, watches in horror as the rebels are slaughtered. Just as hope seems lost, Hadrian arrives with a cavalry charge, cutting through the garrison's ranks and forcing them to retreat. He rescues Arista, declaring victory. Exhausted and emotionally drained, she collapses into his arms. Part 17. Deegan Gaunt. In Chapter 1, Hadrian searches the battlefield for survivors and helps a wounded Imperial soldier with Miranda, a woman who reveals her brother, Deegan Gaunt, is the leader of the Nationalist army. As they talk, Miranda explains that her mother, a midwife, delivered Deegan after a violent incident involving a swordsman, a murdered family, and a stolen necklace. Hadrian realizes the significance of the necklace, which his father had also worn. He learns that Miranda's brother is Deegan Gaunt, leaving him with a troubling connection to the Nationalists and his quest for answers about his father's past. In Chapter 2, Arista is appointed ruler of Renid by the city council after the defeat of the Imperials. Despite Emery's vision of a republic, the council insists she take the crown due to her leadership. Arista agrees to serve as temporary mayor until a proper government can be established. Meanwhile, Hadrian discusses the survival of the imperial heir, Deegan Gaunt, and the support of Ezra Haddon, who has been aiding the Nationalists. Hadrian prepares to leave the city, entrusting Arista with crucial defenses and expressing his respect and farewell, knowing their paths may soon part. In Chapter 3, Thrace dreams of a beast attacking her father, but the dream takes a strange turn when she wakes to hear a squeaking sound outside. Looking out the window, she sees men in black and scarlet armor unloading a wagon carrying a chained man. They discuss his mysterious powers and the need to keep him hidden. The man is treated with care, and the knights plan to seal him away to protect a powerful secret. Thrace watches silently, disturbed by the sight, before eventually falling back into an uneasy sleep. In Chapter 4, Arcadius, a lore master, arrives at a crossroads to meet Miranda, who has traveled alone. She tells him that the Nationalists have taken the city of Ratibor and Hadrian is leading them. Arista is managing the city, focusing on establishing a republic. Miranda is concerned about her missing brother Deegan, and Arcadius believes the secretive Serret may have him. The two discuss the rising threats in the region, including an enemy army near Aquesta and a dangerous man named Merrick Marius. Arcadius stresses that Hadrian and Royce must never learn the truth about the heir.